gentlemen, this is Tim Spencer sitting in for John Moore on the John Moore Show. Today is Friday, the 27th day of October, in the year of our Lord, 2017. Good morning, everyone. First hour guest today is Mr. Tom Berryhill, radio expert. And good morning, Tom.
Morning, Tim. How's it going today?
It's going, buddy. It's going. How's things in your side of the world?
Pretty good. We're just moving forward and having a good time every day.
There you go. So where do you want to go today? What do you want to talk about as far as radios go, Tom?
Well, we left off last week talking about emergency communications, types of equipment, and so on.
Okay.
Of course, I like to focus on HF communications. I think that will be very important in the future, Tim, as we maybe get into some serious situations. I always consider what equipment and antenna systems and so on that would be required for when everything hits the fan. So things like that we can talk about. You want to talk about backup power systems?
By all means.
Oh yeah. So I don't really consider myself an expert in all of this, but I have a lot of hands-on and practical experience. My main expertise is really electronic manufacturing, but I have worked on ham radio equipment and professional two-way radio systems for many, many years. And I'm always willing to share that information with anybody that's interested and to help people get ready for these trying times we're living through.
Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You take the lead. Let's start talking about what you want to talk about. The only thing you mentioned that I know anything about personally is the two-way radio systems like the one we have here on the farm, which operates on 462.7. Most of it is in storage, but we still have that capability.
Is that a family radio service, FRS, or a GMRS?
GMRS, yeah.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about that, Tim. The GMRS system is, it's really not a bad way to go for several reasons. I'm almost positive, and I have to check this, but in January of 2013, the FCC decided that that all land mobile radio systems would be narrow-banded, which means the channel spacing would be closer together. They could squeeze more systems into the available frequency space.
Right.
It's always been a problem trying to squeeze 10 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket, but that's what they basically did. And I really think the older systems sounded better anyway. But the GMRS, the FRS, and several other systems were allowed to continue on with the same equipment. They didn't need to upgrade. Now, this put tons of perfectly good usable equipment on the market. Now, the ham radio operators can use any bandwidth they want.
Right.
But the GMRS still can use the equipment that's been in operation since its inception. So, with that in mind, if you have GMRS equipment or can acquire additional, you can easily set up a system. In your case, Tim, you have a farm there. You put up a tower, I'd say 30, 40, 50 feet. Sometimes just an antenna on top of the roof of your house or the barn will suffice, and you can set up a base station there. Now, on GMRS, unless those rules have changed, it used to be 50 watts. The base station could be as much as 50 watts if it was a repeater. I believe if the base station could be the same. So 50 watts on 462 megahertz will work pretty darn good. The biggest problem
it's just like a telephone.
Oh yeah. Now how far could you talk with that, Tim? Was this to HDs?
Well, when we had our big tower up, when we had our big tower up, which we don't anymore, storm took it down and I never put it back up. We could go 7-8 miles easy because we live in a very high location. the way I understand things, UHF is pretty much line of sight. And we had some pretty good altitude on top of that antenna. And, of course, we had that big old half-inch thick or half-inch outside diameter coax, the big heavy stuff. And that was hooked into a max track that I think was putting out 45 watts.
Yeah, that would work pretty good. And then maybe on a tractor, you could put a lower power radio or higher power. I don't know if the mobile units, what their regulations are on those. The big problem for me, Tim, is keeping up with the regulations. The technology,
right.
the technical side of it has never been an issue for me, but just keeping up with the rules and regulations because they change all the time. I just read an FCC report, I believe it was yesterday or day before yesterday, and they this week for broadcast. This is a huge change, but for the broadcast systems, AM and FM broadcasts, and I would imagine it affects television stations as well. They changed the regulation that you had to have studio facilities near the transmitter location, and they always called it the city of license. And if you listen to a radio station at the top of the hour, they will identify their call sign, and they'll always tell the city that they're in. If they cover a large area, the first city they mention is the city that holds their license. That's called their city of license. And then they may mention 2 or 3 more towns. So if you listen at the top of the hour, you can always tell where an FCC licensed station is licensed and where they're operating from. So they need to have a studio nearby where the transmitter is, and that I believe it was within 25 miles of that actual city where they were licensed. Well, they eliminated that rule, and I'll tell you what, that's going to make some huge changes in the broadcast industry, because you'll have the major radio groups acquiring more stations, and they can feed those with internet feeds and things like that. So it's going to change a lot. I have mixed feelings on it myself. A friend of mine owns several radio stations, and I've done some work for him on those stations. He had a huge fine once from the FCC for actually feeding one of his stations via internet. It was almost like a VoIP circuit that fed the transmitter, and that was a gray area. He was a pioneer in that area. This guy really was very innovative and would come up with some really unique ways of operating fairly within the law. Because it was really, the FCC change is so slow. I mean, they're very, very slow to change and behind the times. So this guy was ahead of his time and got in trouble for it. He did get the fine reduced to a pretty low level, and they let him off the hook, but they take that stuff seriously. So anyway, FCC moves slow, but boy, when that narrow banding came in, they delayed it several times, and now it's put this equipment out. I talk about the rules and regulations quite a bit, Tim, because it is important. But but technically, somebody could set up a base station like what you had and cover their entire property, their farm, and I'm talking a very, a square mile, 640 miles, 640 acres approximately, square acres, and you could easily cover that with a system of that type.
Let me tell you how cheap I did it, Tom.
Yeah.
Now, what I did was, to start with, I bought used radios. One of the school bus fleets here changed out to some other kind of radio. They were 2 crystal little radios. I think they were Midlands. And I bought all of those for $5 each. And all I did was install the proper crystals in them. And I got one of those on the tractor. I had one of them in one of our farm trucks. I also bought an old one from, it was some kind of DMRO auction or something. It was one of those big 90-watt huge Motorola's that you had to sit in the trunk of a car. And again, that one was just, all we had to do is program it with our channel. and we did it. I would say my total investment in radio stuff was less than $200. No, the license was $75.
Yeah. That is one thing about the GMRS. You still do need a license for that. It's not a big deal. Just fill out the form and send it in.
I think it was $75.
Yeah, I didn't know the cost, but that could be. They out in these rural areas, I think most of the people just put those things on and they never get a license. I think it's wise to get one because if you look at the FCC, they have on their website they do have their I forgot what they call it, but where they've caught people with illegal radios and so on, and they have the fines listed and all that. I mean, they really charge the fines. They're not bashful about doing that, and it's for every day that the offense occurs. So it can really add up. I think there is a $75,000 limit on individuals, though. So you can feel a little safety there, Tim. That an unlicensed radio would only have a maximum fine of $75,000. So,
oh boy, that just makes me feel real good.
Yeah, you feel
I'm
much
not
better.
using anything right now.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I mean, you got a license for the thing, that's fine. But see, now that could cover quite a wide area. Now, was anybody else on your channel, or were you there alone?
No, we were there pretty much alone. Even though anybody could be on it that wanted to, it's just nobody else was. We very seldom had any other traffic unless it was somebody driving through town that had those type of radios. But, I went as far as having a tone encoder on ours, and the portables were set up so that, if my daughter or my wife or whatever was in town, they didn't have to listen to the occasional static. I'd send a tone, and then their radio would turn on. And it was all very, very simple to set up.
Oh, yeah, that works quite well. And you can have tone squelch systems on there where only your radios operate are tone encoders. Now you can also have push button encoders on the portable radios, and you can interconnect that thing to your telephone, to your landline, actually use it as a portable phone. Could you reach all the way into the nearest town?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, see, that could be real handy. Of course, with the cell phones and that's all gone by the wayside. But
well, that's the main reason that I didn't maintain our stuff, because we got cell phones. The good part is I could set it all back up in a day if we really needed it, Tom.
Yeah.
Of course, my license is long expired. I would only do it in case of an emergency type thing.
Well, you could get another one, or you could also, Tim, you could use that same setup there. Use the there's some other frequencies available, the family radio service, and you could use that. I think they're limited to 1 watt. They might be limited to 1 watt.
I believe you're correct.
But it's amazing how far that'll go. It is. If there's no leaves on the trees, it covers pretty good, and so it always works better in the winter. And anybody considering this should keep that in mind. That the radios have to be high up. You are lucky if you get a half a mile under normal circumstances, like out on the road talking from one car to another, things like that.
Right.
But if you have a base station, and I don't think the FRS, the Family Radio Service, I don't think they allow tall antennas, but the GMRS works quite good, and you can have a tall antenna like what you had set up there, Tim. Now, you're saying that was a simple system, but to me it sounds like it was rather sophisticated, and most people would not go as far as you did with it, was setting up tone encoders and things like that. But that was
well, it was also easy thanks to the internet. All you do is just follow the directions. In fact, I even got a deal one time on. Remember the old pagers, that people used to carry?
Oh yeah.
I bought a whole box of them for nothing. I don't remember what the price was, and then I bought like 10 or 15 crystals. And they were already on the right frequency. Not crystals, the tone things. They're sort of
those
like
are called.
but not
they're the tone elements, and in the In the old days, there were actually reeds. They were vibrating reeds, and it would vibrate at a specific frequency, and that's what picks up the tone that you transmit, and then allows the unit to be. And usually they're two tone. The real old ones were 2 tones, and some of the later pagers were 5 tones. They had
these and then 2 tones.
Yeah, those are. You know, I had one of those years ago that I used for my business, and it was a Motorola Pageboy 2. It was a pretty small unit. It worked very well. It was tone and voice. Worked great.
Right. Yeah, well, that's what these were. They only took 1 AA battery, and, you know, we wouldn't use them a lot, but if we were going, you know, somewhere where we just did not want a radio, and if something happened on the farm, at least we could be paged. You know,
yes,
so,
yes, they're quite handy. Now, but back to simpler systems, if somebody were to set up a taller antenna with a family radio, FRS type walkie-talkie or HT, they could get some extended range. Now, I don't believe that's going to meet all the rules and regulations, but, you know, we do what we have to do sometimes. And out here in these rural areas, Tim, I don't think anybody would know anything about it. I mean, most of the time those radios, you see them being used in retail stores and out on loading docks at factories and things like that. And they're not really concerned about talking that far. And another situation is if you have a bug out situation, you have to hit the road quick. If everybody in your family, your group or team has one of those FRS radios, that's not a bad way to go because you can stay in touch if you're within a reasonable distance of each other. It will work fine.
Right.
If you're following each other going on the road, that works pretty good. But once you get maybe a half mile, 3/4 of a mile away, it starts to get spotty and you'll lose connections. So higher power radios, I feel, are the best. Now we can talk. Well, we'll talk about the HF equipment next.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, call-in number 800-313-9443. Back in 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at theliberty.
Back, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Friday, 27 October, year of our Lord, 2017. We're visiting with Mr. Tom Berryhill, and we're talking about two-way radios. We wanted to start talking about HTs now, right, Tom?
No, HF, which would be high frequency.
Oh.
Now, Tim,
okay.
the way the RF spectrum is divided up, so much of the cell phone stuff and all that type of equipment, that all works at very, very high frequencies, almost microwave frequencies. And with most of the cell phones around 800, 900 megahertz, and then you get into the metropolitan areas, and they'll use even higher bands than that, usually around 1900 megahertz and 1800. And what we're talking about with these HTs and the system like you have at your farm, that's 462. That's considered UHF. And then there's VHF systems for the ham operators that would be 144 to 148 megahertz with the bulk of the FM, HT, and mobile units and all that. They all operate around 146 and 147 megahertz. That's where most of that activity is. But I like to focus on the HF, which is 2 to 30 megahertz. That's the shortwave spectrum. That's where you're going to have the maximum range with the least amount of power, although it takes more operator skill. You don't just pick one of those things up and learn how to use it and put it to work. No, it takes a little bit of getting used to. You have to learn about antennas, and even in a portable system, when it hits the fan, there'll still be some operator skills that will have to be known. And there's some training that will have to be taking place to learn how to do that. But it's not hard to do. You can get the basic system set up. And a portable, I like the mobile units and the low-power portable units. And one of the radios I like the best, I believe it's still in production, is a Yaesu FT817. That is a small 5-watt radio. Now, it will also do the VHF and UHF bands at 5 watts. It's a single single-sideband AM. You can do CW, which is Morse code, FM. Mm-hmm. So it does all of it. But it's a very compact radio. The battery will typically be bigger than a radio. You can get this radio with a built-in battery, but that's nothing more than a joke. You really need to operate it with an external battery. And I have set up one with a. I use my plastic forming equipment, the same equipment I use for the energy cleaner cases, and I made a case that will hold that radio along with the battery bank and an antenna coupler, or an antenna tuner, as most of the hams call it. And this makes it kind of like a backpack radio. So I am in the process of fine-tuning all that, and that will be a new type of product I think will be well received. There's nobody really doing anything like that. And if you set up something portable, you have all kinds of hodgepodge, haywired connections and stuff laying around. And it's nice to have it all in one container. And so this small radio in this small container is something you can just grab and take out in the field, string up the wire antenna to a tree, and you can talk hundreds of miles with very little difficulty. And if you had a regional problem where you needed rapid communications in a lights out, hit the fan situation, well, this would be the way to go. One of these fold-up solar panels could be employed to keep those batteries. Yes, and keep the batteries charged up. You could also clip it on with clip leads to the nearest automotive source, like whether it be a car or pickup truck, something that was running and had fuel, and you could use that to charge the batteries. You could set up a cigarette lighter cord to run this thing, plug it in the outlet in the vehicle, and power it that way. So you could sit in the vehicle with it, or you could use it outside on a bench sitting on the ground. It's even feasible, Tim, to use a whip antenna on this, although the antenna will be rather large. They have to be 8 or 10 feet long for it to even become useful. But with this, you could talk statewide without any problem, day and night. And that's what I'm really focusing on.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about it as soon as we get back from the break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in 4 minutes.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our energy cleaner promotion, which began August of 2016. In this promotion, you get to buy an energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the energy cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with. And, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the energy cleaner $70 off retail and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Friday, the 27th day of October in the year of our Lord, 2017. We are visiting with Mr. Tom Berryhill. Okay, Tom, where were we?
Well, we were talking about portable HF operation, and I really think this is the way to go with low power, 5 watts. I'll tell you, the military, Tim, had figured many years ago that for portable operations out in the field and HF, they really needed no more than 20 watts. And you'll see the backpack radios, yes, those radios that are used by the military are typically 20 watts, maybe 25 at the most. And they do that for several reasons. It conserves battery power. And everybody should know that when you're operating a radio equipment like this in a portable manner, battery life is very crucial, and you have to pay close attention to the voltage charge on the batteries and make sure you don't run them down too much. The more you transmit, the faster the batteries are depleted, and they need recharging. So that has to be taken into consideration. And most of the equipment is rated on a 80-20 type of duty cycle, where 80% of the time you're receiving and maybe 20% of the time you're transmitting, and then some manufacturers actually go 90 and 10. So you receive 90% of the time, and then you transmit 10% of the time. And then some even go a step further, and they indicate how long the batteries will last if you are on standby. You're not receiving anything, and maybe receiving just maybe 10%, 15% of the time, and then transmitting 5 or 10% of the time. Usually the transmissions are very short. And now with the FM equipment, what a lot of ham operators and people in general don't realize that with FM, when you push that microphone button, it has full drain. The maximum drain on that battery is anytime you push that microphone button. On a single sideband radio, that's not the case. If you push the microphone button and don't make any noise, don't talk, don't do anything, just push the button, it draws very little current, just a little bit more than the receive when you're in a receive mode, because the only time the transmitter has power peaks is on the modulation when you start talking. And on voice peaks, on voice, because it's called a single sideband suppressed carrier. That's what it's called. That's the technical term for it. Okay. On an AM transmission, you have the 2 sidebands, upper and lower sideband, and you have the AM carrier. And the carrier just kind of goes along for the ride, but the information, the voice information, is in those 2 sidebands. So many decades ago, they I believe it was Collins Radio, Art Collins, who started and operated Collins Radio in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They were some early innovators in military systems, and they actually put the ham operators to use to try out this information. The Air Force actually had an airplane set up with single sideband equipment. They traveled all over the country with Air Force operators who were also hams, and then Art Collins was on that plane along with I think it was Curtis LeMay. General LeMay was on there, and he was a ham operator, and they really tried out this new single sideband mode. This would have been in probably the very early 1950s when this was really coming into play. And they tried it out and found it was a superior method and also conserved battery power. Because as you talk, Tim, the AM carrier is suppressed. It is amplitude modulated, but the carrier is suppressed and taken out. and the only thing that's left are the two sidebands, and then to narrow the channel, since the upper sideband and the lower sideband carry the identical information, you only really need one of them. So they filter out the sideband that's not being used, and you talk on the upper or lower sideband. Most of the military systems use upper sideband just because they want to standardize everything. The ham operators use lower sideband and upper sideband with on the lower frequencies, which is 160 meter, 80 meter, or should be 75 meter band. So it'd be 160, 75 meter, and 40 meter bands. They'll typically use lower sideband radio equipment, and on the higher frequencies, getting into the higher ranges, which would be 20 meters and up, they will use upper sideband. There's a lot of ham operators that are interested in using military-type equipment, and they have bought this type of equipment on a surplus market and put it to use, and since they're usually limited to upper sideband operation only, they'll actually set up their own frequencies that they use to stay in touch on. Those interest groups will communicate with each other using upper sideband on the lower frequencies that are where everybody else is using lower sideband. There's no law that says you have to use one or the other. It's just It's just the accepted practice, and it's been that way for. There's some very technical reasons. I won't get into that. It was done that way because of the way the oscillator for a super heterodyne receiver, the way the oscillator signal was injected, it was either above or below the intermediate frequency. We better not go into that, Tim. It'll just get everybody confused. Unless somebody has a question, they call in. We can talk about it. But that is one of the reasons they were using lower sideband on the lower frequencies. Otherwise, I think with the way the radios are today, I think everybody would have standardized on upper sideband and just stayed with that because of the way the military had set it up originally.
Tom, I need to interrupt you for just a second, buddy. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some breaking news just came in a matter of 5 minutes ago. And it might not seem important, but watch the situation. It will become important. Just now, the Catalan Parliament declares independence from Spain, and that is from the BBC. Like I said, it might not mean anything to you now, but in the future, it most certainly will when the European Union starts falling apart. Sorry about that, Tom. I just wanted to get that out there.
Tim, let's expand on that. Now, this is when people need shortwave radios. We all know we can get online. We have our laptops. People are going around with their cell phones. They get all the information from the Internet. That's great. They get their Facebook information, emails, and all that. But if all that goes dark and the powers that be decide to push the button and shut it down, pretty hard to shut down these two-way radio systems, Tim. And if these ham operators are out there, and by the way, this HF equipment, this small Yaesu radio that I like so much, and there's others. I mean, I have another radio it's made by SGC company, no longer in production. I have two of them. It's an SG 2020, and this was a 20-watt HF unit it's a very rugged little unit, very small, and you can hook up military-type handsets to it and all that. I mean, all of these pieces of equipment are great for portable operation, but out of these two radios that I like to use for portable, they will transmit on the ham radio bands, but they will also act as a shortwave receiver, a very, very sensitive and high-quality shortwave receiver. And I think if people don't want to become a ham radio operator, Tim, they should at a minimum make an investment in a shortwave radio so that they can hear what's going on. This situation you just talked about, everybody gets their information online, and the news sources are great. You can listen just about anything that you want, videos and all that. But if they push the button and shut it all down, shortwave radio may be one of the only ways to get information about what's going on in your local area, and it may be from a foreign country. Sometimes the foreign broadcasts are the best ones. They don't.
I agree.
they only lie about what's going on in their backyard, but they like to tell the truth about what's going on across the ocean. So that's something to keep in mind. Yes, you really need a shortwave radio that's capable of picking up, especially in the 3 to 15 megahertz range. At a minimum, you want to have those frequencies. And most of the stuff that you want to listen to is going to be from 3 to 9 megahertz or so, maybe up to 11. I enjoyed listening to shortwave, but I usually listen to the ham operators. But I will occasionally tune in some of the foreign broadcasts, and it's always quite interesting to hear what they have to say about what's going on. So, yes, this type of equipment could be used not only for communications with other family members or people in your network of friends and acquaintances, but also to function as that very important shortwave receiver in trying times. If they shut down the internet, Tim, it's going to be a bad thing. Now, the ham operators they usually can tune to any frequency they want within the allocated frequency bands. And on a 60-meter band, now this is in the 5 megahertz range, and this is something to really, really keep in mind. Don't forget about this, especially the ham operators, that there are 5 channels. Now, these are channels. You don't just tune around and talk where you want, but you have to be on a specific frequency. But there's 5 channels that are set aside in the 5 megahertz range, the 60-meter band. You can only use upper sideband, but initially, and now they've got it where you can use Morse code and also digital communications. So if you wanted to use digital modes with laptops or computers talking to each other, you can do that on those 5 channels, but those frequencies are shared with government users. So I've always said that if they wanted to jam the communications, it would be very difficult for a government to do much jamming on the HF spectrum. It has been done, but it's difficult to do because of the power requirements and also that if you're trying to jam maybe some transmissions in your local area, those transmissions could go vast distances and cause interference to other users that are in other countries that maybe aren't having any kind of a disaster or emergency situation. So by international law, they have to really pay attention to what they're doing and not interfere with other foreign countries. And so with that in mind, all the ham operators and maybe people that are thinking about becoming ham operators, they should focus on those 60-meter channels, those 5 channels in a 60-meter band, because those are shared with the government users. And I've always said a dog doesn't like to poop in its own bed. So if there's going to be any jamming, I don't think there'd be any in the 5 megahertz ranges. And then under a really bad situation, now the ham operators are stuck on those 5 channels, but these ham guys, Tim, they're pretty innovative, and they'll they may just under bad situations, they may just do what they have to do and maybe tune off a little bit to another clear frequency, so to speak. There'll be a lot of that going on, and when it's hitting the fan, I don't think too many people are going to be looking at the rule books.
No, I don't either. In fact, if I remember correctly, Tom, and this is a long time ago when I checked it out, but I think a lot of those rules are automatically suspended, in an emergency. Or am I wrong on that?
I've heard that discussed, and people say you can do whatever you have to do. I think in a life and death situation, you could grab the nearest microphone on any system out there and call for help. I don't think anybody would ever put you in harm's way for doing something like that. I mean, you would not be fined or arrested or anything. I just can't see how they would do that when you're trying to get health and welfare and life and death communications through. I wouldn't hesitate to do it myself. You do what you have to do, and of course, if they don't know who you are, if you're just talking to other people, the CB guys did that. They had their 23 channels and later 40 channels, and they don't observe any of that. But the FCC finally gave up on them. They still Yeah, they still have nailed a few of them here and there, but for the most part, they just gave up. And I'll tell you the truth, some of the stuff on the ham radio bands, I wonder how they get away with that nowadays. But for the most part, it's self-regulated. The ham guys pretty much police their own frequencies, and they keep things in line. But you do hear some wild stuff on there at times. But Tim, we should talk about backup power for your home, because you couldn't run this radio equipment if you didn't have backup systems, and a lot of us are tight. Our wallets are rather thin nowadays, and there's some really innovative ways to get some backup power without spending a fortune. The low priced battery type inverters have become very inexpensive nowadays, and so for just several $100s, you can get a inverter system that's at least 2 kilowatts, and that's enough to run most everything in your house, being lamps. You need lighting, and maybe a radio or a television. Of course, these flat screen TVs take very little power to run nowadays, so that would easily run a television if you needed to operate that. And your computer, as long as your web feed was running, you could use your computer system. And another really simple way to set up some backup power is to find out when they're in your local area. Now, in our area here, Tim, they'll have almost like a trash day where people can bring their junk televisions and old furnaces, refrigerators. They take all the stuff. They take computer equipment, but you have to pay a small fee, like $5 or something, to have them accept that old TV or computer, and then they recycle it. But I've gone to those things for one reason. I watch for people bringing in their uninterruptible power supplies, their UPS systems that run their computers. Those things are usually just a few hundred watts, but some of the larger ones can be as much as 5 and 6 kilowatts or larger. And I've seen those things hauled in because, well, I've got one here that's almost 10 kilowatts, and it's got a lot of weighs about 600 pounds. Yeah, it's big, and it'll run the whole house. But I use it with external batteries, and this is exactly what you want to do. Go to one of those things and find somebody bringing in one of the larger units. They usually junk them because the batteries went bad. They'll buy a whole new unit. There's maybe at least 2 and sometimes 4 small batteries inside that thing. They go bad, but the electronics is still good. All you have to do is take that thing apart, get the batteries out of it, and sometimes the recyclers, they just want the batteries, and they don't want them going in landfills and that, so they want the lead-acid batteries out of there. Just offer to take that thing open right there, take the batteries out, and tell them you want the electronics to use yourself, and they'll let you take it. You get one for free.
Cool. Hey, Tom, we got a break, buddy. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in 3 minutes. 800-313-9443. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the John Moore Show. This is Tim Spencer. Today is Friday, 27 October, year of our Lord 2017, and we are visiting with Mr. Tom Berryhill, and we are talking radio today. So, Tom, this is our final segment, as you know. Any points you want to specifically get out there to people?
Well, Tim, yes. One thing about backup power, those inverters, if you pick those up, just junk the batteries or give them to the recyclers, extend those wires with large size wire out the back of that thing and hook it up to some large marine-type batteries, and you'll have a really nice setup for very low cost. I mean, really low cost. And that works really good to power some lighting and a television and your radio, computer, and so on. And just the larger the better, because the real little ones won't handle it. Another important thing I like to tell people is if you have electric heat, you're in trouble. If you have gas heat, you're better off. And what I do for people, I've done this many times for friends and acquaintances, that go to your gas furnace, and it needs 120-volt power to run. It runs the gas valve and all that, and the control system for the blower. But what you want to do is there's a switch on the side of your furnace. Disconnect that power feed to the furnace and bring that out with a cord. Just cut off an extension cord or something, so you have a plug hanging out of your furnace. And then have an electrician, you can still have that switch, but have that switch turn on and off a regular duplex outlet and plug the furnace in. And the reason for that is in a power outage, you can unplug the furnace, plug it into an extension cord, run it outside, and hook it into your generator. You're going to at least have heat. And it's a really fast way to get that furnace going. Everybody should take that into consideration. You don't have to worry about backfeeding through dryer outlets and having problems with that. So it's just a really neat way to set that up. One last thing, Tim, if people are interested in emergency communications, on November 4th through 6th, the Department of Defense is going to conduct a communications interoperability training exercise with ham radio operators. And they're going to
part of the Mars system, isn't it?
Well, it's Mars, the military affiliate or auxiliary radio service.
Radio system.
But the ham operators will be on there too. Just a regular. You don't have to be a Mars member. They'll be on those 5 megahertz frequencies. Those 5 channels. They're going to focus on that, and they'll have military stations on there as well as the ham operators and the Mars stations. So if you have a shortwave radio that's capable of single sideband reception, it would be very wise to tune in and listen to what they're talking about. I won't be participating because, Tim, I've seen too many of these so-called drills turn into live fire. I'm not interested.
You and me both.
Now, if they blasted off a large EMP or something during that time, all of those stations with those capabilities being on those frequencies could possibly be wiped out. So I won't be putting any equipment on.
Well, Tom, that's it. I'm sorry it's only an hour, buddy. I could do this for another couple. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back in about 2.5, 3 minutes. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
And I'll talk to you next Thursday, buddy.
We'll talk then. Thanks, Tim.
All right, folks, we'll be back in about 3 minutes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the John Moore Show. This is Tim Spencer sitting in for John Moore. Today is Friday, the 27th day of October in the year of our Lord, 2017. We're waiting for Dr. Phil Myers to call in, which he should fairly soon. Quick announcement from John. He called into the network. Wants to let everybody know that his speaking engagement in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, the time has changed to 11 a.m. tomorrow instead of 1 p.m. as originally published. So that is 11 a.m. instead of 1 p.m. Anyway, folks, while we're waiting for Dr. Myers, I'd like to invite you to visit thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. There you can order your energy cleaner. There's tons of free information on the site. On the index page, the main page, you scroll down, there's a lot of very good videos there for you to look at. I think you'd really enjoy them. So that URL, again, is thelibertyman.com. Also, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, ruralsurvival.info. That's ruralsurvival.info. We've still got a few of the survival libraries left, digital survival libraries. All you got to do is click on the red and black flash drive that's top right of every page, and you can learn all the information about it and download the 53-page PDF index. So that way you get to see exactly what's on it before you buy. Anyway, folks, I was just reading here and I mentioned it in the last hour as it came across the wire. The Catalan Parliament declares independence from Spain. Like I was saying in the last hour, that might not mean much to most people. However, if this is successful and Spain is not able to put down this, let's call it what it is, a rebellion, I think you're going to see the European Union very rapidly start to fall apart.
Thursday next week?
Oh, all right. I have just got told we got Dr. Phil on board. Good morning, Dr. Phil.
Morning, Tim. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, buddy. I'm doing real good. How's the world treating you up there?
Oh, fantastic. I'm loving the shift into colder weather. It's really nice, and
it is.
Going to get some firewood for my fireplace soon.
Yeah, well, we did the same thing last night. We saw the weather forecast, brought wood up on the porch. So, we're ready for it. Oh, what do you want to talk about today, Phil?
Well, actually, I was thinking about the same thing. Like, it's been a while since I've seen you, and I know you listen to the show a lot, and possible questions that other people might ask you. Like, what are you interested in hearing or wanted to talk about or ask questions about?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things, now I don't listen to all your shows, on here. I'll be honest with you, I'm time constrained a lot of times when I'm making the recordings. I'll tell you, I guess you call it your biofeedback computer. That one time I was at your office, I found all that quite interesting. You might want to talk about that a little bit. And also, please give out your phone number because I don't remember it. My memory is not that good.
That's okay. Phone number is 314-878-6868 here in St. Louis, Missouri. We have, one of the things that I do is I work with your biofeedback. What is biofeedback? Most people want to know. It's like, okay, well, anything that is you do something and you get a response back from the environment. That's biofeedback. And we can measure that in terms of your heart rate. So if you do something or something is done with you, and then you experience something, your heart rate will go faster and it'll go slower. And over a period of time, we can measure what we call your heart rate variability. So in a 3-minute time span, how fast and how slow did your heart go in terms of its beats? And one of the things that we measure and I like to see a lot is the differential. We normally like to see, people measure their pulse. It's like, oh yeah, I have about 65, 70 beats per minute. Okay, that's really good, but that doesn't test your variability. Tests your variability is like, okay, you had an average of 70 beats per minute high and an average of 60 beats a minute low. So that's about a 10-point differential. That's a really good score. When people get higher into 15, and I've even seen as much as 40 point differential within a heart rate variability, that shows that your system, your nervous system that controls this whole thing, is really, really, really in a stressful situation. And you're just lying there on the table for 3 minutes.
Right.
Just getting measured. And so what stressful situations the heck are you talking about? And it's like, I'm just sitting here. I wasn't in traffic. I wasn't, no one pulled in front of me. I didn't get in a fight with my spouse. I don't have kids, or the kids got to school really easy. I'm good with my deadlines at work. My bills are all paid. I got tax refund this year, or whatever. It's like, what's stress? But your body is showing a very stressful reaction to something. Right. So then that's where other biofeedback measurement tools come into play to help figure out what is it that's stressed out. We know, and we look at that mostly from a glandular standpoint. So because your glands are basically think of them as power plants.
Right.
And if certain power plants are weakened, you're going to lose the grid. We always talk about when the grid goes down.
Right.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And if it's your body, you got a real problem.
Exactly. So your grid starts collapsing, and it'll show up as maybe a stiff joint, a locked-in neck, a little bit of a heart palpitation, or some angina. Oh, I shouldn't have had that sandwich last night. I had a really bad dream. Bowel movement changes, diarrhea, constipation. Your fingernails start getting all cracky. You're getting split ends in your hair. Wow, I never had that mole before. When did that show up? Yeah. Those are signs of the grid collapsing.
Okay.
And so
Dr. Phil, I gotta. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, buddy.
No. Go ahead, please.
Well, something happened to me, and I don't got any secrets from my radio audience to speak of. I got this leg amputated 5 weeks ago, Thursday. Had to. Got bad infection, gaseous gangrene, all that. It was a mess. Now, the way my body felt up until a week ago, even though I just lost the lower part of my left leg, it felt like my body was all out of whack. I mean, everything, even though it was just such a small portion of the limb amputated. Is that normal?
Well, you can never. Here's the thing: is when I hear that question, I don't know what normal is for anybody.
Okay.
So right. No. So as I'll have people say, I'm like, so how is like when I take care of my female clients and they're having hormonal issues or something like that, and I'm like, so how was your cycle this way? Oh, it was normal. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that means.
Normal for her, I understand. Yes.
So to answer your question, normally when you're looking at, there's two ways of always looking at a situation. There's a local effect and a global effect.
Right.
Okay? So, for example, let's talk about, the United States grid of just electricity. Let's just stick with that. Now, you have an electromagnetic pulse wave that Korea decided to send out over our land or whatever, and all of a sudden the whole grid's down. Now, you guys are prepared, and you have local ability to have electricity and power in your local house or a little area. Just because the grid's down systemically, you have a little bit of a local beam here. Or it can be the other way around. The whole grid is working for the city. No electromagnetic pulse went down, but your house power went out.
Right.
And so your local is the problem, but systemically everything's fine. So, but it will affect some type of local response because everybody around the neighborhood is looking at your house like, dude, why is their house all off the grid? What's going on?
Yeah.
Because everybody else's is up. And so you get to kind of see the difference between looking at the body from a global local or a local global effect. And whenever I'm working with a person, I'm always looking, there's their chief complaint. There's the thing that they're most concerned with. That's what I would consider the local thing. Like, can you do something about my neck pain? Can you do something about my heart palpitations? Can you do something about my hormonal bitchiness? And that would I be consider a person's local effect. Now, you can look at like, oh wow, your adrenal gland or your thyroid gland or your sex glands, just mainly just saying prostate, uterus, ovaries, or testicles.
Right.
Is there a local incongruent issue going on in there, or is it a systemic problem that's creating the thyroid, adrenal, or gonadal problem? And so you with the gangrene on the leg, sorry, and the amputation, sorry, but now was that because there was a global effect of an immune deficiency, more bacterial, viral, fungal, mold issues, an immune issue going on, that then you had a local infection and the global system couldn't help it, so it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse because there was no global effect to help with the local infection.
Right.
Or the other way around.
What they told me, Doc, was that I just didn't have enough blood flow. I had blood flow into my leg, but they said it was blocked coming out of my leg, coming back up my leg. And that's
Correct.
what their final thing was, and they decided it just was not ever going to heal. And I couldn't handle the smell anymore.
Yeah, so that's, no kidding. So that's what I would have considered more of a global effect affecting a local condition. And so because they were doing everything they could to locally stop it, but systemically or globally, your heart, your circulation or blood flow, the immune white blood cells, and all the awesome chemicals that come from your immune system that flow through the body to get rid of any type of local infections, and then to re-heal the cellular matrix at that level was very limited. It wasn't able to help you out from a global standpoint. So they stopped the local infection, but now that that's there, the next phase from if we were to work together, I'd be like, okay, what's the local condition that could help us amp up your global response? And then as we work on, then what's the global overall therapies that I can help you with to make sure your local tissues are getting all the information possible? So my biofeedback computer helps me do all of that for my clients that are not here in my office.
Understood.
And it works like this because all of us, for example, when a person is in an office and they're doing a stress test or a heart rate variability test, we have a little finger probe that it's just a little infrared laser that connects to the pulsation of your index finger.
Right.
And that has more of a direct link to the aorta aspect of your heart, and so that we can then measure the pulse wave and the heart rate variability there. Now, it's measuring a signal, a frequency, a vibration, and an amplitude of that signal inside your matrix. But we also have an external electrical signal that spans as far as out as you can ever imagine. So you have just as much information, electrical frequency vibration within you as you do without, and they're equal. So as above, so below, as within, as without, the whole thing, it works at that level. So what we do is we tap into your specific vibrational frequency, and then we can measure your biofeedback, that rhythm and rhyme, on many, 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 many levels.
Okay. Dr. Phil, we got our break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in 3 minutes. Call-in number is 1-800-313-9443.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com.
Friday, the 27th day of October in the year of our Lord, 2017. We're talking with Dr. Bill Myers of St. Louis right now. Dr. Myers, let's go ahead and continue. We've got about 4 minutes here before we go to the bottom of the hour break.
Oh, that's perfect. So the biofeedback computer system measures many, 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 many levels of stress response and body's reactions to different type of stresses. So, for example, it's like I was explaining just, for example, heart rate variability is just one test. But now let me throw what we call in homeopathy nosodes. These are chemical, bacterial, fungal, mold, viruses, allergen reactions of a certain thing, and we throw that at your body. Energetically. We want to see how do you respond. It's like, for example, if you went to an applied kinesiologist or a person that does muscle testing, and they have you hold a vial over your thymus gland, and then they muscle test your arm, and your arm goes weak. Oh, you responded to that vial. Now, was that a healthy response or an unhealthy response? Was an allergy response, or was it toxicity response? Or was it, hey, I need to have more vitamin, mineral, enzyme of this level, or this organ collapsed when I became in contact with this supplement or this nosode. So we get to then I get a whole, and I can have 8,000 different tests done in about a 4-minute period, measuring everything from bacteria, fungus, mold, viruses. I can then see how well your endocrine system's doing, your spinal system's doing, your nervous system is doing, your digestive system's doing, your gut flora system is doing, your traumas and dramas from when you were 5 years old and you got abused by your babysitter, or when you were 13 years old and you got into the car accident and got the major whiplash, but you're now 40 years old and your neck still hurts. And so what's the global and local breakdown of it all? And then the cool part about this machine is it not only gives those readings of your body's feedback to stimulus, but now we can actually send the proper frequencies that bring a cellular system into what we call coherence. Coherence is a state of equilibrium and the ability to communicate properly. So decoherence would be he said, she said. But she said this, well, he said that. That's decoherence. Coherency is a loving embrace with a couple where they get each other, they see each other for who they are and know what's going on. They're coherent. And so when our body's cellular system at any level, like just for example, let's say the hypothalamus communicating to the thyroid, which is giving it thyroid stimulating hormone to stimulate its response for adrenal gland support of adrenaline because you just saw a deer run in front of the road and you have to stop your car really quick.
Right.
That would be, you'd want to have that to work in really good coherence, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. But if it's in decoherence, your reaction time might slow down. You might have been foggier in the brain, just be like, okay, it's still driving your car, which we all do, and then the deer comes out in front of you, and your reaction time was just a second and a half too slower than it would have been if it was in coherence, and you end up hitting the deer.
Right. Yeah, crashing your car.
So,
yeah.
Exactly. So what the SCIO does, it's called Subconscious Computerized Integrative Operating System. We call it SCIO for short.
Wow. All right. Well, Doc, we'll be back in about 4 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for Dr. Myers, call in at 800-313-9443. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in 4 minutes.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our energy cleaner promotion, which began August of 2016. In this promotion, you get to buy an energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the energy cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with. And, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the final half hour of the John Moore Show on Friday, the 27th day of October in the year of our Lord, 2017. We are visiting with Dr. Phil Myers right now, and we have been talking about his biofeedback computer, and we can continue on that, Dr. Phil, if you want, or we can go a different direction. Completely up to you, sir.
No, this is great. So one of the things that people ask is, well, how the heck do you tap into my energy field if I'm halfway across the country and you're in St. Louis and I'm in Nevada? Like, how do you do this? So it goes into more a little bit of astronomy and positionality of the planetary alignment and the gravity and timeline that you were actually born on. So when you were actually born, you ended up having your specific energy grid and your unique perspective of how you see the world. It's actually a very unique thing about being human beings. Nobody on this planet has the same perception that you do because of the specific time, date, and location that you were born in, specifically then with the different parents that you had, and then the different genealogy within that matrix of your two parents that was formulated within you. So there's a lot of variables that go on with it, but eventually, all in all, you have what we call your time stamp on this planet. And we know these time stamps very well when we look at fingerprints, when we look at iris scans, when we look at DNA analysis. There is nobody else on the planet that has the same fingerprints or the same iris scan or the same or any test. You have your unique signature. And so we're utilizing that type of technology. And that might sound really weird for somebody. Some people might sound very new agey or esoteric or just plain woohoo. But if you look back in the time of the FBI, way back in like the Lindbergh baby time, fingerprinting was considered esoteric and woohoo and very, very off kilter.
Yes, it was.
And so, and now it's like, well, did you fingerprint? Like, duh. So we're just using technology that is available that just maybe not be understood, but it's available. I mean, my God, I really don't understand how the MRI machine works either, except that it's a big, huge magnet, spins really, really fast, and I'm apparently I'm supposed to take off all my jewelry when I walk in there, and I need to tell them if I have a pacemaker, because it's going to fry it if I don't.
Exactly. Yeah, they disabled my defibrillator with a magnet before I have one of those. They can actually turn it on and off with a magnet.
Yeah, exactly. And so what you're using, magnetic pole, gravity. And there's just amazing science that is out there in the world that we can just start tapping into every single day. So what we do is we tap into those frequencies, and then we send coherent messages back to you and help your cells get into more coherence. And then what I do is, as I'm looking at this, it's all about lifestyle. So what is the reason that you're, and I always say this, the reason that you're in the life that you're in right now is due to the lifestyle that you've lived. Okay? Some people lived a very conscious lifestyle. Some people lived a very unconscious lifestyle. And all of us lived a mixture.
Uh-huh. That makes perfect sense.
And so, that being said, we work at that level for you to help get your next phases going. So if I see, okay, this is the system. So, like, for example, if I notice that there's a really decoherent messages coming from the gut, I'll talk about, okay, so what is it that you're ingesting or involved with? And so it's like, okay, let's see what lifestyles we can change to help have a better metabolism, get better gut flora health, better metabolic function from the foods that you eat, into how it then creates your eyeball. And So we then look at different lifestyles and I just call them your homework. And so what I do is I send, like, okay, this is the stuff that you can start doing to keep your body in the coherency that we've just given you during your session. And then the more you start living that lifestyle, the more you keep building upon coherency. And the more coherent you get, the stronger the relationship gets between, now let's go back to the analogy where I was talking about the hypothalamus to the thyroid due to the deer. Right. So now you have better coherency. Now you see the deer when it's peeking its head out of the forest, and you can slow your car down, honk your horn, and the deer never even enters the road.
Right. Which is, of course, the preferred situation. Absolutely.
Absolutely. But now you were able to do that because you were in more coherency with your senses. One of the biggest things from a decoherency in the body versus a coherency in the body is lack of senses. We lose our sensuality. And we see that all the time. The older we get, the blinder we get, the deafer we get, the less taste, and the less we know we are in space and time because our joints are all stiff.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
All those are signs of decoherency of your body. And now you can look at that from a very global aspect of like my physical body that I can see, taste, touch, and hear, and I can look in the mirror and say, there's me. Or we can go down all the way to a cell. We can go all the way down to the atom of a cell. We can go all the way down to the information that's held within the genetic code of a cell, and all the way back up to you looking in the mirror. And if you just had stepped on that scale and saw that you were 100 or 75 pounds overweight, then you'd have the response or the biofeedback of your day. Like, man, the diet's not working. Or, man, I wish this diet would start working, or whatever. So we can look at it from a very global aspect or a very local aspect. Either way, it'll work. You just have to then continue building up the system and finding out where the problems are. Like I have a lot of people that they'll come to me and they're doing all the right local work, but they're not tapping into the global aspect of how their body communicates overall. Or the other way around. They're really, really, really in touch with how the global aspect of oneness and connection and all that stuff is going on, but they are completely thrown off by this local effect that's going on in their body that keeps nagging them maybe daily, weekly, monthly. Oh, man, it always happens this year. Every time this year, I'm always dealing with this thing. When's this ever going to change? That would be your local effect.
Makes sense. It really does. Everything you're saying makes sense to me, Dr. Phil.
I'm glad. I'm glad. So that's what our biofeedback computer is all about. It's a fantastic device, and we've had it for years. Actually, this technology was initially used. Was initially used in the space program, where they wanted to where they needed to be able to know what was going on with their astronauts in space, heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, sweat dilation, urine output, input, bathroom break, all that kind of stuff, brain waves. They needed to know how healthy their astronauts were up in space. Well, where's the wire? There's no wire. There's no wire that's going to take me up to space and be connected to my little box here, and then go all the way down to Houston space station out in Texas.
Right.
So they were using this bioresonancy frequency technology. We've known about this stuff for eons. It's available.
Right.
To the mass public.
I'm just curious why it's not used more.
It's because from my standpoint, we get lost in the difference between vitalistic medicine and holistic medicine. Allopathic medicine and holistic medicine.
Right.
It's a completely and utterly different belief structure in how the mind-body-spirit connection works. If you only see the body, mind, and that thing that they call, that esoteric thing, if you're only seeing it as molecules of electrical impulses, of tissue and structure, well, yeah, that's all you're going to see. But if you also see, yes, that's true, and it has a frequency and vibration and resonancy to it that is not only palpable, but is infinite in its possibility. And how can you limit Wi-Fi? No, Wi-Fi is everywhere.
Yeah, it is.
The more towers, Wi-Fi is always there. X-ray is always there. Radio is always there. Our visual light spectrum is always there. It never wasn't.
Right.
And so if you start realizing that and then I'm not saying that, I'm just talking about why, the answer to your question of why it wouldn't be in one place or the other, like why don't they talk about it as much, is because they're still stuck in the old belief structure of if you just exercised and ate right, then you'd be fine. Well, yeah, that's true. Exercising and eating right is really, 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 really important. And connection with yourself, tapping into your higher divine wisdom within inside your pulse wave, the vibrational frequency tone that radiates throughout your entire body that we measure in a heart rate variability test.
Uh-huh.
We see it. It's there. They don't know what to do with it. Oh, your heart rate variability is all off here. Let's try a beta blocker because it's definitely a chemical imbalance.
I understand, yeah. And that is their answer normally.
And that is their answer normally. So how can you change the frequency? It's chemical. Well, no, it's not chemical alone. It's energetic too.
Right.
And so it's from my vision of the world, it's a perception problem. It's a belief structure stuck in old thinking, and not old, because old thinking is actually get you back to the root of you are a frequency, vibrational, tone human being. If you really get back to old teaching, I say old in just terms of just last couple hundred years old, maybe 1,000 or so.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to look at, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm absolutely amazed. I know I'm not saying much, Doc, but I'm absolutely amazed by everything you're saying. I had no idea that your machine could do a tenth of what you're talking about. I mean, this is wild.
Thank you. Yeah, and different practitioners out in the world that understand how the body works, that live this coherency model where we're looking at bridging everything together, the physical things that you do, the mindfulness way that you live, the embodiment of it all, and the lifestyle that flows from that. That's the cool part. The more you start living it, the lifestyle takes over. It's not like, oh, I have to live this lifestyle to get this. No, you start doing this and the lifestyle just becomes.
Right.
Like, wow,
I can understand that.
Yeah, I mean, for one, my family decided to have pizza for everybody, and they love Papa John's. And one day, I came home and there was leftovers, and I was like, I really didn't feel like cooking. I mean, I love it. It was just one of those days I just didn't feel like cooking, and I got home and I'm just like, you know what? Okay. So I took 2 pieces out of the fridge, put them in our on our stone pizza maker thing, and got it out. I had about half of that pizza, and I had to stop because it was like I couldn't live that lifestyle anymore.
Okay, hey Doc, hang on for about 3 minutes. We have our final break, ladies and gentlemen. We got time for one quick call. 800-313-9443. Back in 3 minutes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the John Moore Show. I am your guest host, Tim Spencer. Today is Friday, 27 October 2017. And Dr. Phil, we've got a caller on the line. We've got Rick in Missouri on line 9. Go ahead, Rick.
Good morning, Tim. Good morning, Doc. Hey, great discussion. I'm having a good time. But then it's the way I roll. But and not to change the subject at all, but as I'm zipping across the outskirts of St. Louis in my Carhartt windproof jacket, I'm reminded that the weather is changing. And the last couple of years, at your direction or suggestion, I know I was taking large doses of D3. And I wonder if you would just, I want to say it has something to do with my immune system, but because we're getting into that time of the year where little kids with snotty noses are going to come to your house and that kind of thing, would you just remind us briefly why I was doing that and why probably everybody should, if that's the case?
Yeah, the D3 combination is really important because D3 has a direct link to your immune system. And the more access you have to D3, the more vibrant and coherent your immune system is going to be to combat bacteria, viral, fungal, mold issues, and specifically viruses and bacteria. And so amping up your D3 during the more winter months, because we're in less sunlight, so there's less there. It also amps up that immune system. I also recommend adding colloidal silver to that mixture, about a little bit of colloidal silver, depending on what brand you get.
Well, how much are you supposed to ramp up the G? I mean, how many IUs are you talking about?
For the average global answer, if you've gotten sick, you want to be between 40 and 50 IUs. 40 to 50,000 IUs. If you're not, you want about 20,000.
Okay.
And that's about every 5 days a week.
Is there a problem with uptake? I mean, does this have to be in liquid form, or what are we talking about?
It depends on the manufacturer and the product lines. Some D3s are really crappy. Some D3s are really amazing. It just depends on what company you're working with. Like, for example, a liposomal D3 is going to be completely different than a non-liposomal.
What are you saying? You got some on the shelf, or where were you going with that?
What I'm saying is just there's different ones. So if you're when you're asking me about dosages, I couldn't tell you because I don't know what D3 you're actually taking. But from a global umbrella answer, you're normally looking at wanting to get an absorption rate of about 40 to 50,000 IUs of D3 in per day. But if your immune system's working really, really well, if your nervous system's working really, really well, it's in a coherent standpoint, you don't need the D3.
Not at all?
Because your body's already producing it within the electrical signals that came in from your coherency in the beginning.
All right.
But thank you, Rick, for calling.
Unfortunately,
Not
we're
at all.
out of time. And thank you for your call, Rick. Dr. Phil, I'll be listening to you next week when John is back. Sincerely appreciate you being on the show today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, remember that the time of the presentation John is putting on starts at 11 now instead of 1 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have a fun and safe day, and God bless America. Bye-bye.